A fresh dawn unfurled in the realm of the Ares Empire. In the bustling main square, a resplendent statue of a valiant hero adorned atop a steed stood tall, while the townsfolk meandered about, and children frolicked with unrestrained joy. A guard, diligently patrolling the thoroughfares alongside his companion, queried whether the atmosphere felt overly serene. With a weary sigh, he noted that the timing of the revolutionaries' next move remained a mystery. They were merely simple country folk. What revolution? The guard chuckled, concurring with his partner's sentiment, asserting that tranquility had reigned of late, perhaps a sign that the insurrectionists had come to recognize the futility of their little uprising. His colleague opined that the imperial knights must have dealt with them decisively, hoping that such peace would endure. Meanwhile, in a dimly lit basement, the revolutionaries convened, hatching nefarious schemes. A man leaned over a tattered map, proclaiming to his compatriots that this very night would witness the assassination of the emperor and the crumbling of the empire. This was the singular path to reclaiming their kingdom. The others remained hushed, nodding in tacit agreement. He then focused on one individual, entrusting him with the most critical duty, Logan Lan. Approaching the table, Logan received the solemn charge to safeguard the secret manuscript at all costs. He affirmed his understanding before exiting the underground hideout. A knight pursued him, catching up and expressing his patriotic fervor, questioning Logan's motivations. The knight lamented the significance of the manuscript, a relic many had sacrificed their lives to protect from the empire. Since Logan bore its burden, he would inevitably become a target for the empire's forces, thus compelled to take perilous risks. Logan countered, asserting that his involvement stemmed not from choice but from obligation. The knight's insistence on Logan's fluency in the ancient tongue felt like an unwarranted slight to their comrades, prompting an immediate freeze in the knight's demeanor. He clarified that this was not a matter of patriotism but rather one of vengeance. He had once been a man of little worth, recalling a fateful duel with his younger brother, Ronan, which he had lost. Murmurs arose among the spectators, incredulous that the esteemed young master Logan had been bested by a brother who had only taken up the sword 3 years prior. Logan had devoted a decade to knightly training. The future of the Lan family appeared grim indeed. As Logan lay on the ground, absorbing these revelations, he made a pivotal decision. Shortly thereafter, he was summoned to his father's study, where he slammed his hand onto the table in a fit of fury, accusing his father of using paralyzing poison against his own brother. Has he completely lost his mind? Logan seated in silence, his lips pressed tightly together as his father seethed with rage, dismissing him as no longer a son. This inferiority complex spiraled into madness, leading Logan to harm his brother and subsequently be cast out from his family. Following his expulsion, he became a mercenary, and it took a decade of arduous toil for him to recognize the wretched man he had once been. Alas, it was too late. One fateful, rain-soaked day, as he traversed the city streets, he overheard 2 girls whispering about a public execution scheduled for that very day, the prisoner bearing the name Lan. A chill gripped him as he froze, and upon hearing his brother's name, he dashed back, recalling the girl's words that Ronan had fought valiantly against the empire. As Logan raced toward the square, dread coursed through him. He was desperate to convey a message to his brother, wishing fervently for Ronan to still be alive. But upon his arrival, the guillotine had already claimed its victim. The guard displayed Ronan's severed head to the crowd, shouting for all to see the fate that befell one who dared to defy the empire. The people erupted in cheers, while Logan's heart shattered. In that moment, he vowed vengeance against the empire for the slaughter of his family and the brutal denial of his chance for atonement. As memories of that harrowing day replayed in his mind, Logan found himself enmeshed in a perilous pursuit, the guards hot on his heels, shouting that he possessed the secret manuscript. He sprinted through the corridor, fatigue beginning to weigh him down until he stumbled upon a dead end. One guard caught up, calling for reinforcements as Logan cursed under his breath, clutching the hilt of his sword. The guard lunged, and their blades clashed. Logan pushed back with force, sending the guard staggering in retreat, a cry of despair escaping his lips as the tip of Logan's sword found its mark in his throat. Another guard, witnessing the demise of his comrade, cursed loudly, but Logan wasted no time, lunging forward to dispatch him as well. As the count of fallen foes began, yet another assailant leapt from behind, sword poised to strike. Swiftly, Logan pivoted and retaliated, intent on vanquishing more of the Empire's minions. Yet, as the guards closed in from every direction, one demanded his surrender, insisting he relinquish the manuscript. Gazing around, Logan contemplated the grim reality of his situation, a sardonic smile spreading across his face. With a resigned flourish, he cast aside his sword, declaring that he had no other option. Producing a blue sphere, he crushed it within his grasp, triggering a transformation as it glowed crimson, energy swirling chaotically around him. With a confident grin, he proclaimed their shared demise was imminent. The guards, paralyzed by the radiant light, remained oblivious to the impending explosion that would follow. Logan's existence had been steeped in regret, driven solely by the thirst for vengeance. He found solace in having dealt retribution to his enemies, yet the specter of his greatest sorrow, his inability to seek forgiveness, haunted him still. In the afterlife, he hoped to find his family, to apologize for the pain he had caused. In an instant, his surroundings shifted. He was no longer engulfed in darkness but instead lying on a bed, exhaling a heavy sigh. Startled by a sharp pain radiating from the back of his head, he pondered the impossibility of his situation. A servant named Rick entered, concern etched on his face. Confused, Logan asked if he truly lived, to which Rick confirmed his role as the faithful servant. Logan, grappling with the surreal notion that he had perished 30 years prior, pointed at Rick, bewildered. The servant, taken aback by the declaration, raced to the door, calling for a doctor, fearing Logan had suffered a grave head injury. As chaos ensued, Logan turned his gaze toward the window, observing the nightly training grounds adorned with the sigils of his house, questioning the reality of his experience. Suddenly, the door creaked open, and to his astonishment, his younger brother Ronan stepped tentatively into the room, inquiring about Logan's well-being. Time stood still as Logan froze, the familiar cadence of his brother's voice washing over him. He turned, uttering Ronan's name, but his brother averted his gaze, the tension palpable in the air. Logan's turmoil deepened, recalling the aftermath of their first duel, the anger that had driven him to cast Ronan aside, reminding him of his status as the offspring of a mistress. Despite the harshness of those memories, Ronan had once followed him with unwavering devotion, until that fateful day. Overwhelmed, Logan clutched his head, teeth gritted as Ronan's concern intensified. Rick urged Logan to rest, but he insisted he was well. With a tender smile, Logan beckoned Ronan closer, his demeanor shifting dramatically. The servant observed in bewilderment, unable to fathom the sudden transformation in his master's spirit. As Rick exited, Logan turned to Ronan, apologizing for the past, expressing regret for not showing more care. Swinging his legs off the bed, he smiled, assuring Ronan that he bore no fault in their tumultuous history. Yet, as his voice trembled, he bowed his head, overcome with emotion. Ronan, sensing his brother's distress, urged him to take care of himself, but Logan's thoughts spiraled into sorrow, mourning the loss of the innocent boy who had once fought valiantly under the kingdom's banner. With tears streaming down his face, Logan clasped Ronan's shoulders, imploring for forgiveness. He enveloped his brother in an embrace, the weight of his guilt crashing down around him. "Why are you crying?" Ronan asked, bewildered. The older sibling, however, remained silent, enveloping him in a firm embrace that elicited tears, cascading down his cheeks. They lingered in that intimate hold for an extended moment until, with swollen eyes, he rushed to the door. A tentative smile graced his lips as he promised Logan that he would return for another visit. Logan, with his gaze still misty, waved farewell, bidding him to rest well. As he watched his brother depart, a frown creased his brow, pondering whether this was merely a fleeting dream. If indeed he had traversed back in time, he realized he must alter the course of destiny. His reverie was abruptly interrupted by an anxious maid who called out to him. Turning in confusion, he witnessed her bowing and seeking his forgiveness. Perplexed, he inquired what transgressions warranted such an apology. At that moment, Rick burst into the room with an awkward grin, explaining that Maria had disturbed his rest due to a mix-up in the rooms. Both he and the maid expressed their contrition to the young master, prompting Logan to feel a twinge of shame for his past mistreatment of the servants. Assuring them that all was well, he requested pen and paper, leaving them both astonished. Rick, already conjuring dreadful scenarios, hesitantly asked what he intended to do with those items. With fervor, the protagonist declared that he needed to take action and fulfill his request. Subsequently, Rick provided him with the necessary supplies, and Logan settled at the table, thanking him and instructing him to leave without interruption. Rick, astonished, questioned whether he had truly just received gratitude, expressing concern for Logan's well-being. Growing weary of the inquiries, Logan insisted he was fine and urged Rick to depart. With a sigh of relief, Rick acquiesced, leaving him in solitude. Alone, Logan crossed his arms and sighed heavily, contemplating the consequences of his past actions. He recalled Rick's voice echoing through the door, indicating that Maria had claimed he yelled at her, hence confirming his well-being. Covering his face with his hands, he sighed deeply, reminding himself that he must exhibit patience. These were the repercussions of his own choices. More pressing was the task of documenting the future, a war looming against the Empire in a decade, a catastrophe that threatened to obliterate not just his family but an entire nation. He was resolute in his mission to avert such devastation, yet first, he needed to navigate the impending Basel War, set to erupt within a year, which would shatter his family and usher in dark times. After some time, he found himself at the threshold of his father's office, where a servant announced his arrival. Baron Lan, standing by the window, turned, contemplating whether this was indeed Logan. Moments earlier, as Logan walked towards the office, the surrounding servants had recoiled in fear, hastily retreating from his presence. One maid, laden with linen, stumbled and fell at his feet, trembling with trepidation. Logan extended a hand to help her up, inquiring if she was injured. She accepted his assistance, gazing up at him with gratitude, yet her expression morphed into one of terror. He reassured her, flashing an unsettling smile, prompting her to scream in panic. Bowing her head, she pleaded for mercy, declaring her guilt. Taken aback, Logan sought to understand her outburst, but as he scratched his head in bewilderment, he recognized that his sudden transformation might be disconcerting to them. It would require time for them to adjust to this new demeanor. Directing his gaze toward a mirror, he pondered whether his disconcerting smile had provoked such a reaction. Upon entering his father's office, he greeted his father with a warm smile, announcing his presence. Patrick Lan turned, his expression a mixture of pity and surprise, admitting he was glad to see Logan looking well. However, he swiftly inquired about the purpose of his visit. Logan, taken aback by his father's cold demeanor, explained that he sought permission for private training near the family cemetery. Patrick, intrigued, wondered about the preparations necessary for the regional war. The answer was straightforward: consolidate the forces, enhance the knights and guards, innovate weaponry, and more. However, funds were lacking, as the Mlan family was notorious for its poverty within the empire. Yet, an opportunity loomed in 3 months that could drastically change their financial standing, contingent upon honing his combat skills to earn a vote of confidence. Patrick queried whether Logan intended to flee due to a defeat against his younger brother. Logan clarified that this was not his intent, rather, he had come to realize his shortcomings and, albeit belatedly, had drawn conclusions. Patrick expressed skepticism, attributing Logan's previous failures to a lack of perseverance. Logan acknowledged that his behavior had posed another challenge. Patrick, weary, turned back to the window, instructing him to leave. Logan raised his voice, asserting that all this time, instead of acknowledging his flaws, he had displaced his frustrations onto others, acting foolishly and immaturely. This training, among other things, would facilitate self-control, and he urged his father to grant him permission. Patrick, finally hearing the sincerity in Logan's words, asked how long he intended to train. Logan replied approximately 3 months. His father questioned whether he believed this time frame would suffice to catch up with his brother. Logan clarified that his objective was not to defeat him but rather to maximize his own potential within that period. A faint smile crept onto Patrick's face as he recognized the transformation in his son. He ultimately consented to the training, prompting Logan to express his gratitude. As Logan was about to exit, Patrick reminded him that although it was spring, the ground remained too frigid for resting, advising him to keep warm. Logan acknowledged the concern with a smile. Days later, he arrived at the training grounds, discarding his backpack and sword on the ground, declaring it a space exclusively for immediate family, ensuring he wouldn't be disturbed. With ample room for solo practice, he couldn't risk exposing his training methods to others. He retrieved a book from his backpack, a smile gracing his face as he contemplated the secrets of the divine sword. In his past life, he had memorized its contents before incinerating the manuscript to prevent its capture by the Empire. The tome, adorned with a golden falcon, detailed the wisdom bequeathed by an ancient hero who vanquished a malevolent dragon. He had read it using a coded language known only to the independent army, ensuring its contents remained concealed from prying eyes. Now, the thought of transcribing the entire text anew weighed heavily on him, yet if the manuscript proved genuine, mastering its teachings would render him formidable against the aura masters of the Empire and even archmages. In his previous life, his advanced age and lack of aptitude hindered his progress, but now, the resurgence of his powers invigorated him. Clenching his fist, he felt enveloped in a golden aura, the very essence of life energy that transformed the body, foundational to the divine sword's secret. He needed to concentrate this energy within his heart to forge a core. This task, daunting for an average individual, had previously overwhelmed him. However, post-return, he sensed his strength surging. 3 days and nights of relentless effort loomed ahead, yet suddenly, a remarkable shift occurred. His eyes widened as he perceived the formation of the core. Elation surged through him as he clenched his fist, retrieved his sword, and prepared to delve into the manuscript's secrets, stepping forward with determination. Amidst a serene morning, he concentrated deeply, executing a delicate swing of his sword. With precision akin to a master, he cleaved the stone before him, an act that ignited a profound joy within him. His physique and emotions had undergone a remarkable transformation, aligning seamlessly with his aspiration to wield the sword with unparalleled mastery. The enigmatic origin of his burgeoning power puzzled him, yet the trajectory suggested that in merely 3 months, he would ascend to newfound heights of strength. Resolute in his commitment, he pressed forward with his training, diligently refining his swordsmanship. Days melded into one another, and as dawn broke once more, he found himself before an imposing tree, contemplating that this day marked the culmination of his intensive study of 10 esoteric sword techniques documented in an ancient manuscript. Among these, the transcendent spacetime slash beckoned him, a technique rumored to defy the very fabric of reality. Raising his sword high, he assumed a poised stance, confident that with just one star core, he could replicate the legendary maneuver. A luminous golden aura enveloped both his blade and body, fueling his conviction that success was imminent. With a decisive swing, he unleashed a wave of energy that surged forward, morphing into a rippling caress of destruction. The impact reverberated through the tree trunk, a resounding crack echoing in the stillness. Dust billowed, and leaves cascaded down like confetti, while he caught his breath, collapsing to the ground in exhilaration. As he lifted his gaze, laughter erupted from him, a sound of pure delight upon witnessing the tree trunk severed cleanly in two. His joy intensified, surpassing his wildest expectations. Such prowess, he mused, was beyond the reach of a mere novice. Observing his trembling hands, he recognized the toll of his initial exertion, yet the thrill of possessing a hidden strength was invigorating. He had achieved the pinnacle of his training and yearned to share this triumph with his father. Yet, he knew a thorough cleansing was requisite before such an audience. Upon arriving to visit his father, he was unexpectedly barred entry by a knight, who, with a wry grin, expressed regret that the lord was unavailable. Puzzled, he inquired about his father's health, only to learn that family law prohibited even close kin from visiting the master without prior notice. A hint of worry creased his brow as Rick, his confidant, whispered that these archaic laws had persisted for centuries. He recalled a visit 3 months prior where no such restrictions existed, and the knight's smile hinted at a lapse in duty. The protagonist sensed an anomaly. This was not the norm from his previous life. The murmurs of nearby guards reached his ears, revealing their scornful remarks about the knight's temperament, suggesting he was losing his composure. The protagonist felt the weight of their derision, realizing that even his family's knights were mocking him. The knight suggested that in the future, he should seek permission before approaching, prompting a weary sigh from him, for he had anticipated showcasing his newfound capabilities. Reaching beneath his vest, he instructed the knight to state his name, pondering the knight's hesitation. When the knight introduced himself as Dominion, Logan, his resolve unyielding, remarked that he was impeded from visiting his father under an outdated family law, further scolding him for his insolence. Rick, sensing the tension, grew agitated, while the knight seemed perplexed by the protagonist's sudden assertiveness. In a moment of bold defiance, Logan challenged Dominion to a duel, declaring that he would not tolerate further insults. The guards around them gasped in disbelief, while Logan smirked, taunting Dominion's silence and suggesting fear had gripped him. The head servant, visibly anxious, scanned the area, worried about the impending confrontation. Logan's taunts escalated, painting Dominion as a coward stripped of his former glory, which ignited the knight's rage. With fists clenched, Dominion accepted the challenge, and they transitioned to the training grounds, armed with wooden swords. The guards exchanged bets, their skepticism palpable. One wagered 50 gold pieces on Logan's swift defeat, while another anticipated a mere 5 minutes of survival for him. Logan, overhearing their disparagement, found himself musing over their lack of faith in his abilities. As the duel commenced, the atmosphere crackled with tension. Dominion assumed a stable position, enveloping himself in an aura that startled onlookers. Unfazed, Logan prepared himself, aware that despite the wooden weapons, the knight's inherent might could still pose a risk. The judge, sensing the stakes, implored Dominion to temper his approach. As the battle began, Dominion launched forward with ferocity, but Logan remained unwavering. At the opportune moment, he evaded Dominion's strike, executing the great triple kill technique effortlessly. To the spectators, it appeared almost casual, yet the strain on Dominion's face belied the truth of the impact. His wooden sword clattered to the ground as he knelt, grappling with the reality of his defeat. Shocked gasps erupted from the onlookers as Logan, radiating confidence, challenged Dominion's claim to knighthood. The defeated knight remained on his knees, bewildered, while his comrades expressed disbelief at the swift turn of events. Logan called for the judge, suggesting a second chance for Dominion, who remained unresponsive, shaking in disbelief over his own inadequacy. In a moment of desperation, Dominion rallied, raising his sword anew, yet Logan, undeterred, countered with a blow that sent blood cascading from Dominion's nose, toppling him once more. Disgusted, Logan observed the knight's predicament, feeling a surge of vindication as he realized the knight had squandered his opportunity for redemption. Dominion, crushed by the weight of his defeat, conceded, yet before he could utter a final word, Logan's slap sent him sprawling once again. In his mind, he had shown sufficient mercy to the fallen knight. In a moment brimming with defiance, he confronted his lord, fully aware that the time had come for retribution. Drawing his lips tight in fury, he cast a scathing glance at the knight before unleashing a furious assault with his sword. The knight writhed in agony, pleading for mercy, while a nearby servant, gripped by horror, bit his fingers and lamented the cruelty before him. Rick, witnessing the scene unfold, implored if anyone could intervene. The other knights stood in astonished silence, one of them questioning the drastic transformation of their once gentle master. How had he metamorphosed in just 3 months? Not only had he unearthed formidable power, but he had also revolutionized his swordsmanship, as if he had wielded a blade for decades. At long last, the master ceased his punishment, lowering his weapon, while the judge proclaimed Logan land victorious. Following this, he met with his father, who commended his impressive display. It appeared that Logan had awakened to a newfound potential during his training. When asked by his father what had transpired, Logan reflected on his journey, responding that he had relinquished selfish desires and was prepared to shed the shackles of his past. In a pivotal moment, he felt an exhilarating surge of power, reminiscent of the sensations he had experienced in a previous existence. It was only after he vowed to forsake vengeance upon his family that he discovered true strength, a feat he had barely managed to awaken after 4 decades. Patrick, his father, acknowledged the evident change in his son, but was perplexed by Logan's choice to attack the knight immediately after achieving clarity. With a disapproving gaze, he confronted Logan, who defended his actions by asserting that the knight deserved his fate, having overheard the entire sordid tale from the guards. Logan insisted that if left unchecked, the knight's deceit would undermine the discipline that upheld their household. He believed that hierarchy was the cornerstone of their establishment, and if it faltered, the entire structure would crumble. After a decade as a mercenary, he understood that the willfulness of armed men must be swiftly quelled, and today's incident would serve as a cautionary tale for the other knights. Upon hearing his son's reasoning, Patrick lamented that the Dominion had gravely erred. They had forgotten their obligations and attempted to deceive him, but had overstepped their bounds. He advised Logan to temper his actions in the future. Surprised by his father's rapid forgiveness, Logan remained taken aback. Logan, recalling his father's words, noted that his fiancée, Rena, would soon visit. Overwhelmed with exhilaration, he mused about her imminent arrival, likening it to a long-awaited blessing. A carriage arrived at their estate, from which a young lady emerged. The guards announced that Lady Rena Wolves had arrived, and she made her way through the estate, eliciting admiration from both servants and knights alike. one knight remarked on the young gentleman's fortune as Rena paused at the stairs to greet Lord Lan. A radiant smile illuminated her face as she inquired about his well-being, to which the Baron chuckled, remarking on her transformation into a true lady. Rick, captivated, pondered over her beauty, recalling her childhood visage. However, he noticed Logan's sullen demeanor and questioned why the young man, who should be brimming with joy, appeared so despondent. Lady Rena procured a scroll from her attendant, announcing she would now read a letter entrusted to her by the Count. The letter began with pleasantries directed to Lord Patrick Lan, and after a lengthy recitation, which soon bored the knights, she finally disclosed the crux of the message. Due to unavoidable circumstances, the Count requested the dissolution of their engagement. The hall fell into an oppressive silence, with Logan reflecting on the veiled implications underlying the message, suspecting it indicated a decline in their family's stature. Finally, Patrick erupted in indignation, questioning whether the Wolves family sought to insult them by breaking off the engagement without justification. The knights, sensing their lord's mounting fury, grew tense as Rena, with an innocent visage, pleaded for the opportunity to clarify any misunderstandings. Tears brimmed in her eyes as she reminisced about the cherished memories of her childhood spent in their company, vowing to apologize personally to Logan. The maids, moved by her sincerity, began to weep, proclaiming her heart as beautiful as her exterior. While quiet sobs permeated the hall, Logan, feeling the weight of the moment, could only manage a nervous smile. Marion Kiro, the Baron's wife, voiced her displeasure, demanding to know the reasons behind Rena's visit. The young lady, her gaze cast downward, admitted she lacked knowledge of the circumstances surrounding her family's decision, confessing her destiny lay in another household. Marion sternly questioned whether Rena had come to announce the engagement's termination without understanding the rationale. Nervously, Rena mentioned that their house intended to offer 3 million gold as compensation. Dwayne Filner, the financial manager, perked up at this revelation, while Logan smirked, believing fortune had smiled upon them. Yet, Patrick's booming voice shattered the optimism, asking how they dared to present such an offer. His words reverberated through the estate, causing one knight to remark on the sheer force of Patrick's presence, leaving Rena visibly shaken. The knight, rocker of the Wolf's house, stepped forward, urging calm as he sought to continue the dialogue. Patrick acknowledged Rocker's status as a high-ranking knight but questioned whether injuring their rising star would suffice to restore their dignity. With a gulp, the knight summoned his courage, declaring that the head of his house had deemed him a man of honor and would not pursue the young lady further. Rena interjected, asserting their intention was not to purchase honor with gold, but rather to offer the sum as a gesture to maintain camaraderie despite the public fallout. Patrick, gritting his teeth in frustration, contemplated the implications of continued conflict. If he pressed too hard, he risked becoming a mere specter of honor. With a measured tone, he acknowledged that a guest, even one delivering ill tidings, should be treated with respect. Lady Rena, visibly relieved, listened as Patrick declared that while they would not accept the Wolves' offer, they would only ask for a sincere apology from Rena to his son. The knights erupted in approval, praising their lord's noble stance. However, Logan, feeling the weight of the situation, raised his hand to speak. With a nervous smile, he requested his father's attention. In his mind, he recognized the dire need for the financial support of 3 million gold, a sum that constituted their annual budget. The cessation of aid from his stepmother's family would lead to their imminent downfall. He implored his father to accept the Wolves' offer, provoking an explosive reaction from Patrick, who questioned whether Logan sought to renege on their agreement. The tension in the room escalated, and Logan felt the pressure of expectations mount, realizing that while his father was a formidable high-ranking knight, the stakes were far too high to dismiss the opportunity at hand. The moment he faltered in resolving their predicaments, it became evident to him that progress would remain elusive. His father articulated that their household possessed sufficient dignity to forego financial gain at the expense of their honor. Taking a steadying breath, MC straightened his posture and countered, asserting that their financial state was indeed dire. They were encumbered by a debt of 3 million to the bank, with an annual interest burden of 150,000. Without immediate assistance, bankruptcy loomed ominously before them. His father and stepmother exchanged incredulous glances at his declarations. He went on to predict that they would soon be heralded as a prominent family among the impoverished, marking a definitive decline for them. Although he wished to voice these sentiments, he restrained himself, recognizing the formality of the gathering. He posited that the acceptance of the 3 million was essential, precisely to preserve their honor. Patrick, bewildered, inquired if this was the rationale behind his request for a reversal of his word. Apologizing profusely, MC elucidated that House Wolves held superiority over them and that the Earl commanded the Eastern Territories. Despite the Earl's forces being stationed there, they did not serve him directly. He feared that a mere apology could ignite rumors of their attempts to curry favor. As murmurs began to circulate among the servants, Rena interjected, asserting that her family was reasonable and held great respect for the honor of House Bland. Turning to her, Logan remarked on her audacity. She had arrived to terminate an engagement yet continued to prattle on about reasonableness, rendering herself a laughingstock. Stung by his words, she fell silent. In a previous existence, Logan had believed her to be genuinely sorrowed by the impending separation. Yet, before their parting, she had summoned him for one final rendezvous, expressing gratitude for his presence and desiring to forge a last memory together. Enthralled by her charm, he had once thought risking everything for the woman he adored was the best course of action. Just as he contemplated proposing a new life together, she revealed a dagger, lifting the hem of her dress. Alarmed and bewildered, he called out, only to witness her slice through the fabric. In a moment of confusion, he regained composure, drew his sword, cast aside the knife, and held the tattered dress to her chest. With a smile, Rena questioned if a mere boy like him could truly possess her. She urged him to recognize his position and depart, stating that he had already made her task simpler, for which she offered her gratitude. Bewildered, he asked what she meant, but she remained silent, erupting into a scream that summoned a knight into the chamber. As she burst into tears, claiming that young Master Logan had turned aggressive, the realization struck him: she had ensnared him in a trap. Burdened with numerous transgressions, he recognized that his family's trust had eroded. Consequently, they were compelled to apologize to the wolves and remit exorbitant compensation. This betrayal engendered a profound mistrust of women. He surmised that her intent was to manipulate them, utilizing the breakup to her advantage. Regrettably, he was resolute in his belief that she would not succeed this time. Initially, he had aimed to rehabilitate his reputation within the family, believing that a gradual reformation of his image would sway their perceptions. However, the confrontation with Dominion illuminated the guards' blatant disregard for him, and rumors had proliferated in his absence. Could he truly influence his family by garnering public acclaim? With just 9 months until the regional conflict, his reputation seemed a trivial matter. Clutching the railing, he resolved to salvage his family's standing. Turning to Lady Rena, he declared his acceptance of the compensation, defying his family's wishes. Her shock was palpable, prompting his father to voice his indignation, demanding to know how he dared oppose his authority. Logan countered, asserting that hollow apologies held no merit. If their honor could be reduced to mere words dissolving into nothingness, then its value was equally insubstantial. Lady Rena, visibly seething, paused before conceding that House Wolves would acquiesce to the will of Lord Bland. She then turned to Lord Patrick Bland, inquiring about his final decision. Casting a disheartened look at Logan, he surmised it was a tactic to shield her father's reputation, likely exacerbated by the prospect of paying 3 million. The Baron, representing House Bland, stated that a sincere apology sufficed for him, causing the guards to fidget with unease. He continued, asserting that ultimately, his son had made the decisive call. His wife expressed her discontent, and a murmur rippled through the assembly as they deliberated their master's choice. Rena, gritting her teeth, grasped that the young master would ultimately opt for compensation. Meanwhile, his father cautioned him against the danger of trading his honor, warning that future concessions would become more palatable should he yield now. Fixing him with a stern gaze, Logan silently apologized, knowing he could not acquiesce. As one who had suffered from the severance of an engagement, he resolved to accept the monetary compensation from House Wolves. Marin grinned while Rena's face flushed with indignation at her son's remark. Patrick, disillusioned, lamented that he had hoped for some improvement, only to find it had regressed. It was his own failing for not imparting the true significance of honor. With his head bowed in guilt, Logan rationalized that he acted for the benefit of their family. Eventually, he received the funds and, gazing at the chest brimming with gold, reflected on the 3 million pieces that would provide much-needed tranquility. He reminded himself to temper his excitement. First, he would deposit the money in the bank. A knock at the door disrupted his thoughts, and assuming it was Rick, he invited the visitor in. To his surprise, it was Dwayne, who approached with an air of contrition. Logan, taken aback, inquired about his name, to which Dwayne smiled, placing a hand on his chest in greeting. Recognizing him as the financial steward and his father's confidant, Logan became wary of the unexpected visit. Dwayne, sensing the scrutiny, felt a wave of anxiety wash over him. As the financial manager of Lan, he was tasked with trimming the budget for the entire estate. Complaints flowed in about dwindling supplies for the winter and the urgent need for new weaponry for the guards. Previously, he had resorted to begging his father-in-law for aid, wondering if he was the finance manager or the overseer of destitution. Had it not been for the nostalgia of his hometown, he would have departed long ago. However, he now saw an opportunity to stabilize the situation, if only temporarily. From his viewpoint, Logan appeared a naive child, and Dwayne resolved to exploit this perceived immaturity to siphon off the funds for himself. Feigning nonchalance, he chuckled, remarking that he had merely come to extend his greetings. Yesterday, Logan's stoic demeanor had astonished him, yet he praised him for standing firm against unreasonable pressures, offering a thumbs up and a smile, expressing his astonishment at the audacity of Houseplan. Logan, perplexed by Dwayne's effusiveness, tilted his head, questioning the absurdity of his remarks. Dwayne, caught off guard by this unexpected response, cleared his throat, declaring that in these trying times, 3 million gold pieces would be akin to rain during a drought, providing a much-needed lifeline for the family. He inquired why the money had been entrusted to him. While the financial manager feigned friendliness, the embers of resentment flickered within him. He anticipated this outcome, but thought it worth a shot. This young man had monopolized the funds and intended to squander them on himself. Clenching his fists in fury, Dwayne mentally urged himself to remain composed, recalling 2 decades of servitude as Lan's financial overseer. He had once groveled before Viscount Kiro for assistance, accustomed to humiliation. Now, he found himself in a similar predicament, trembling as tears streamed down his face, concealing it behind his hands. Noticing Dwayne's distress, Logan inquired if the situation was truly that dire. Recognizing an opening, Dwayne quickly regained his composure, claiming ignorance about the family's debt to Cooper Bank, which totaled $3 million. Logan interjected, noting that the annual interest amounted to $150,000. Dwayne, taken aback, gaped at him in disbelief. Logan, placing a hand on his belt, proclaimed that harvest season had arrived, allowing them to settle the interest. Dwayne was astonished, pondering how Logan had acquired such knowledge. He chuckled nervously, stating that managing a barony invariably required funds, and they perpetually found themselves in short supply. If Logan could assist in any capacity, it would be a tremendous boon. The young gentleman shook his head, expressing regret and declining the offer. Dwayne, bewildered, sought to understand why he had opposed his father for the benefit of the barony. His disappointment grew as he finally grasped the significance of Logan's response, asking in disbelief if he truly acquiesced. Logan affirmed his intention to utilize the funds for the family's welfare, rather than for immediate expenses, emphasizing the necessity of planning for the future. The chief financial officer's anger simmered beneath the surface. As if preordained, he instinctively sensed the need to hand over the funds. The main character inquired how settling the debts might transform the family's overall predicament. The financier articulated that such an act would enhance their financial attitude, rendering the management of the estate considerably more feasible for the forthcoming years, granting them a much-needed respite. The young master probed further, and Dwayne, taken aback, struggled to formulate a response. Wouldn't they merely find themselves ensnared in debt once more? He pondered aloud, acknowledging the absence of any significant assets available for liquidation. It was a relentless cycle he yearned to dismantle, with the funds earmarked for his ambitious scheme. At a loss for words, the financier scrutinized him, astonished, and began to question whether this was truly the same bully he had known, envisioning him as a youth indifferent to the tribulations of his family. The protagonist, however, had a proposition to present. If a favor were granted, he would assist in alleviating some familial expenses. Dwayne's curiosity piqued, prompting him to inquire about the nature of this request. Logan, with a sly grin, conveyed his need for Dwayne to assemble a band of mercenaries. After a brief interlude, Logan commenced packing his belongings for the journey, prompting Rick to question his imminent departure. Adjusting his armor, Logan affirmed his intent, leading Rick to express concern over the abruptness of his exit, especially given his recent return from solitary training. Contemplating for a moment, the protagonist replied that he needed to generate income. The head servant exclaimed incredulously, questioning whether he didn't possess sufficient funds. Logan, seizing his backpack, retorted that he required significantly more. Rick's worry escalated as he voiced his certainty that the Lord would vehemently oppose such a venture. The tense atmosphere enveloping the castle was palpable, and the protagonist concurred, asserting that it was precisely why he must depart clandestinely. This revelation only heightened Rick's anxiety as he exclaimed in disbelief, "What does this mean?" Logan, exasperated, covered his ears, urging him to quiet down. If he could not salvage his reputation now, he surmised, then altering the course of events would remain futile. He had to orchestrate an army beyond the castle walls, fortunate to possess insights into the situation since his expulsion. First, however, he needed to ascertain the whereabouts of a certain individual. Rick, bewildered, protested, "What is he thinking? What kind of escape is this at his age?" The protagonist donned his backpack and remarked on Rick's stubbornness. The servant, consumed by despair, lamented what he could do if Logan were to flee. He would have to contend with him. Logan sighed wearily, lifting his foot as if to step on him, but Rick, panic-stricken, implored him to pause. The protagonist reassured him, stating that he had penned a letter to his father. No one would lay blame upon him. The chief servant, slightly pacified, inquired about the letter's contents, to which Logan responded only with a cryptic smile. Subsequently, the chief servant himself became acquainted with the letter's message. Seated in the Baron's office amidst a thick atmosphere of tension, he felt his nerves fraying, observing his master practically seething with fury. Patrick clutched the missive from his son, whose words lamented the heartbreak caused by the engagement's dissolution, announcing his temporary departure with a promise of return. Strangely, such a succinct note seemed to amplify Patrick's ire, as he bellowed his son's name throughout the chamber, while the chief servant shed tears, inwardly pleading for his master's swift return.